Oh my goodness, we just heard from Deanne in Vancouver, and she said it's 1:30 a.m. and it's warm. Yeah, really appreciate you being here. And Brenda in New Plymouth, New Zealand says it's 8:30 p.m. Right, so I think 2 more minutes and then we'll start. We've got lots of people joining us now, which is great. So I think what we'll do is we'll maybe start at about 1 minute past half past. And we'll start at 9:31 UK time, which is 8:30 p.m. to 8:31 p.m. New Plymouth, New Zealand time, and 1:31 a.m. Vancouver time. Just a couple more minutes and then we'll start. And again, if anybody who's just joined us would like to put a contribution into the chat box just to say where you are and how the weather is. And we just heard from Susan, who's in Leeds, who says it's sunny, and from Sam in London, who says it's very hot and sunny. Brenda, I'm really sorry about this. This must be kind of hard when it's so dark and then you get lovely summers, I know, in New Zealand. And Tracy is in Kent, and it's gloriously sunny and warm. So it's 9:30, but I think what we'll do is, just because so many people are still coming onto the WebEx, I think we'll wait 1 more minute and then we'll start. And I think, Paul, we should start recording now. So, good morning, and let's start. So, my name is Helen Bevan, and I am Chief of Service Transformation at NHS Improving Quality, which is the national improvement body for improvement in the NHS in England. And I'm going to be leading the web seminar for the next 90 minutes. And our topic is Scrap the Change Programme. This is an era for change platforms. I don't think that we necessarily do need to scrap the change programme, but it's a title that gets attention. And in terms of who we're going to see this morning and interact with, I'm going to be leading the session with my colleague Jodie Brown. And Jodie has had a lot of practical experience around setting up change programs and interacts with lots of other people who run change programs, who run change platforms. So she's going to be injecting, I think, a lot of practical wisdom into the session. Jodie, do you want to just say hello so we can all hear you?
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, that's great.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And then also we've got two other colleagues that you're going to hear from this morning. And one is Kate Pound, and Kate is going to be the monitor for our chat room today. And one thing I really want to encourage is, so many people that are taking part in this WebEx today have got lots of practical experience, and it would be really great to hear your views and to share. And these WebExes are always so much better when we get a lot of chat activity going on. And our colleague Janet will also be monitoring Twitter. And the next slide I'm going to show you is all the details of ways to connect and get in touch. So if you're somebody who likes to tweet, we'd love you to tweet during this session. And what Jodie and I will do is every so often we will stop and we will get some feedback from Kate in the chat room and Janet on Twitter about what everybody's saying. So let's continue this and talk about joining in today and beyond. So please use the chat box. And if you're going to tweet, can you use the hashtag EdgeTalk? So hashtag EdgeTalk. And our handle is the Edge NHS. And if you want to carry on with this discussion, what we suggest that you do is you sign up to our knowledge hub, which is the edge.nhsiq.nhs.uk, and it's free. There's 21,000 people across the globe that connect with the Edge, and this talk today is part of a monthly series called Edge Talks, which are linked to that. What we're going to do is we are going to produce a summary of the discussion today using Storyfy, and we'll put that on our website, the Edge. And what we're also going to do is next Wednesday, which is the 8th of July, at 4 to 5 p.m. UK time, we're going to run a tweet chat on the issues and the content of this Edge Talk today. And again, we're going to do that using the hashtag EdgeTalks. So we hope that you can join us for that as well. So let's get on with the content. So we're going to start off with I think some very wise words from a well-known philosopher, and that is Galadriel from the Lord of the Rings. And I'm not going to pronounce the Elvish version of it, but what she says, the English translation, she says, "The world is changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air." And whilst that's obviously being written about fantasy and the Lord of the Rings, I think it perfectly sums up where we are. And in my job as Chief Transformation Officer at NHS IQ, I get to link with change leaders, practitioners, researchers, futurists all over the world. And there's a real sense that the nature of change is changing, and we have to organise ourselves in different ways. So, I think that this contribution from Galadriel, I think, perfectly sums up where things are. And I also think that this quote from John Hagel helps. And I think that, for those of us that work in health and care, we are in a world of mounting performance pressure, where the demands on our services get higher and higher, and the resources that we have available to meet those demands from our patients, from our citizens, get tighter and tighter. So in this world of mounting performance pressure, actually what we need to do, we need to evolve. We need to find ways to change, which mean that we can deliver. And John Hagel says the most successful will be those that evolve into movements. And he says success will be determined by their ability to mobilize, inspire, and support an ever-expanding array of participants, extending far beyond their own four walls. So in a sense, what he's saying is that many of the answers that we need in the future, however clever we are, and however hard we work, we can't find the answers typically within the four walls of our existing organisations. We need to go look way beyond our walls to enable change to happen and get ideas for change. So, I think that's a perfect starting quote when we think about how we have to move from many of the ways that we've typically done change up until now, where we work with systematic change programs inside our organisations, to moving to change platforms where we can literally engage with the world. And another thing, going back to Galadriel and how our world is changing, I think a helpful way of thinking about this is to contrast old power with new power. And what I see happening certainly in the NHS in England and the wider health and care system, is there's a battle going on between old power and new power. So when we talk about old power, it's a currency. It's like who's got the money, who's got the resource, and who hasn't. And it's held just by a few people, the people with the position of power. And when they want to make change happen, they push it down in organisations. They use the levers of hierarchy and performance management to push change down. And change is commanded. We have to do this. We have to take this action. We have to be part of this change because it's what the organisation has decided, or it's what the commission has decided, or you have to do it. And very often, the way that we interact is in a very closed way. It's about, how can we improve the performance of this organisation? It's the actions that we can take to improve things. And very often, when we work in old power ways, they're transactional. They're about the performance objective, or the commission, or the contract, or the national target. And the way in which these things happen, they're transactions. We're holding people to account for undertaking a transaction. When we think about new power, the evolving thinking about power, it's a current. So it surges with energy as many people are mobilised around change. And rather than being held by a few people, this kind of power is made by many, many people coming together, getting organised, mobilised. And in a new power era, ideas and power are pulled into the system because we have relationships with others. And in this world, power is shared by many, many people. And the way that we operate is in a very open way, bringing lots of people in. And rather than being transactional, essentially it's relational. It's about how do we engage, how do we mobilise people. We do that through relationships. And the thing about when we work relationally, people are engaging in change because they want to, because it fits with who they are in the world and their own values and emotions, rather than having to in a more transactional world. And what the authors, Hyman and Tim, who are the people that are taking these ideas forward about old and new power, say is that the battle and the balancing between old and new power will be a defining feature of society and business in the coming years. And what I say is the battle and balancing between old and new power will also be the defining feature of the health and care system in the coming years. Because you see, what I see happening is as pressure mounts, performance pressure mounts, and money and resources get tighter and tighter, when we're thinking in an old power way, what we want to do is we want to get more grit, we want to take tighter control, we want to avoid risks. And yet, history tells us that actually many of the ideas and the approaches that we need for the future are in that new power world. And I think we're going to be increasingly seeing new power ideas, new power perspectives. But where we need to be as a community of change agents, where we need to operate, is in this very difficult zigzaggy place in the middle. And I think it's we need to be operating in an old power and a new power world. And even though some of us may be people that are big proponents around new power, engaging and network, working with many, actually we're living in a world that's predominantly old power, so we need to live with both. And I think this is where platforms can come in, and thinking about working through change platforms as opposed to change programs can be incredibly helpful. So, what do we mean by a platform? Because we keep talking about this word platform. And Jodie put this slide together, and I think it's really clever. So what she did is that she went into the Oxford Dictionary and looked at some of the really basic definitions there around what platforms are. And I think it really helps our cause. So the first thing is about, or the first definition is about a raised level surface on which people or things can stand. So this idea of a level surface, you know, that in a platform, anybody and everybody can contribute to change, not just the people with the position of power or the currency. So the next definition, a raised floor or stage used by public speakers or performers so that they can be seen by their audience. So, you know, this idea of being seen by a lot of different people. You know, it's very transparent, it's very open, and can be seen by lots of people. And we want lots of people because we want new ideas, we want diversity of thought. Okay? And the third definition was a raised structure standing in the sea by which oil or gas wells can be drilled or regulated. So thinking about drilling, you know, I think again it's a very helpful definition of a change platform because you know, when we get lots of people contributing ideas, we can drill in and find the absolute gems and the knowledge that we need to make a difference. The fourth definition was a raised structure or orbiting satellite from which rockets or missiles may be launched. And again, you know, the whole point of having a change platform isn't just about bringing ideas or wisdom together. It's about using it as a platform to launch change, action, things that make a difference for our patients, for our colleagues, for our citizens. And then the final definition was the declared policy of a political party or group. And again, a change platform is about having a really clear purpose for doing something that appeals to a lot of different people and enables people to make contributions voluntarily. Because the thing about a platform is you can't make people take part in a platform. People have to volunteer. You know, they do it because they want to do it. And it's about, you know, bringing lots of people together with a shared purpose in order to enable us to make lots of ideas and discoveries. So let's think a bit about the history of platforms. So I'm just going to put a little question now into the chat, which is, you know, when we think about platforms and those organisations that were the pioneer of the kind of platform movement or got us thinking in platform ways, in the chat box, can you send to all participants, you know, who, what are your ideas about who are some of the organisations, you know, or systems that started, that were like the genesis or the starting point of platform thinking, or some of the best platforms in the world? Let's see if anybody can give us this. Stonewall, very good. Yeah, Terry says Google. I agree with that. John Lewis, okay. Get a few more. The Scottish Patient Safety Programme do well with platforms. Yeah, Facebook, great. Hospital movement. We've got IKEA. We have Virgin. Apple. Twitter. Yeah, very good. Nike. Yeah, I agree with all of these. Instagram. So, you know, very often people talk about the big four, and you know, when we got most of these, so Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, and you know, and in a sense, what these organisations did, they came and they started to work in very different ways. So instead of being about pushing products, they created platforms. So they did this because they were really good at using technology and were able to create you know, technology that enabled people to share. And again, rather than being an internally focused organisation, they embraced partnerships and external innovation, so going out and making lots of connections you know, with others. And they put a lot of effort and energy into building interactive communities, so constant, you know, sharing and learning and growing. And the fourth thing that they did was they embraced an entirely new way of doing business, which is that they created the idea of platforms. And a lot of our thinking now, or the thinking that influences us in terms of change platforms, you know, is very much part of what came out of this different way of doing things. So, if we think about this, the power of the platform. This is a quote from Ashoka. What these 4 organisations and others have shown is the power of the platform. And what they've shown is that if your average 21st century citizen is given the tools to connect and the freedom to create, they will do so with enthusiasm and often with an originality that blindsides the so-called creative industry. So you just give your average 21st century person the tools to connect and the freedom to create. They actually do better than creative organisations. And in this context, good leadership is no longer about taking charge or imposing a strategic vision, but about creating the platforms that allow others to flourish and create. And I think that, loads and loads of examples that you've put in the chat box, I think demonstrate that, really well. And I think that this quote, says to us, actually, when you look at our incredible NHS workforce, we look at the wider health and care system, we look at the people that use our services, we look at our broader citizens, people in other industries. If we can actually be given tools to create, to connect, and freedom to create, we can really, really move things forward. And I think again, we're in an era where we need to think in different ways about change. And this was some research that I saw quoted from IBM, which I thought was interesting. And IBM did a survey of leaders about how successful they are in managing change. And they did the same survey in 2008 and again in 2014. And what they found was that whereas in 2008, 41% of leaders considered they were successful in managing change, by 2014, only 20% of leaders considered that they were successful in managing change. And I think, yes, you can say, well, maybe it was something about the sample and how the study was done. But, what they're basically saying is that we're working in an environment of change which is so complex, okay, so fast-moving, that we can't just keep doing change the same way. And yet, if we look at certainly the NHS, the wider health and care system, and you look at the tools that we're using to improve performance and manage change, many of those tools haven't changed at all in 10 years or 15 years, and yet the world around us is changing massively. So maybe it's about time for our change tools and perspectives to catch up. And, really like this quote here, which has come from Deloitte. New mindsets, I would also say new power, are likely to take hold as the profession embraces more networked and web-like arrangements. So why can't we, as the change community, the change leadership community, why can't we be the people that lead the vanguard around working in these different ways? Because what platforms do, I think very, very powerfully, is they give us access to resources. They take us beyond the 4 walls of our organisations and give us access to people all over the world. And Bill Joy from Sun Microsystems talks about Joy's Law. And Joy's Law says, no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else. Okay? So however clever you are, the smartest people are someone else or somewhere else. So actually what platforms become is a sort of a Joy's Law for this era of networking and social and engagement. And Joy's Law in that era says the best resources and capabilities always lie somewhere else outside of our organisation. And we have some choices, we can buy in very expensive management consultancy that tells us what to do, or we can connect through platforms with these people. And I think the final thing I'd kind of say in this phase of the talk is that, the great thing about platforms is that they engage emotions. And they have to engage emotions because, people take part in platforms. If we create a change platform and ask people to engage, they do so because they want to, not because they have to. And and if we want to engage people and mobilize them in change, we know that evidence tells us really clearly the most effective way of doing that is connecting with emotions and values. And so, when we think about the social technologies that we use to underpin our platform, they allow people not only to consume, but also to share and make things together for social good. And I think, if I was going to define the kind of change platforms that we're seeing growing, sprouting up exponentially around the health and care section, around the health and care sector, it's around enabling people to share and make things together for social good, and people really get that. So, I talked a little bit about this idea of platforms, and let's relate that very specifically now to the way that change happens in our sector. And I think when we think about our change processes, okay, are we designing cathedrals or are we designing bazaars? And I'd actually say that most change processes that I see, big, large-scale change processes, certainly in the NHS, are bazaars rather than cathedrals. So when we think about a bazaar, or we think about a cathedral, it's very structured and it's very systematic. There are very clearly certain people in charge around that structure. Whereas if we think about a bazaar, you kind of create a place where people can trade and share, things happen much, much more emergently. And we have lots of cathedrals. I mean, this is a very classic, large-scale NHS change program where, we've got a PMO, a program management office, when we're trying to transform care, or integrate care across our local community. And what we do is we create this very systematic cathedral-like plan, and we hold people to account. And we say, these are the timescales, and these are the milestones, and you're accountable for undertaking certain tasks in a period of time. And there will always be a place for program management offices and cathedrals. There absolutely will be. But I think we're in an era now where, when we work in this way, it isn't fast enough, it isn't broad enough, it isn't engaging people emotionally, it isn't connecting with the want to rather than the have to. And I think we're in an era now where we need a lot more bazaars. And I think that the era of change platforms, I think sums that up very well. So in a sense, I'd say what we need to be doing is we need to be moving from a situation where most of the change work that I see around the NHS and the wider health and care system are change programs. And we talk about, systematic change management. We're seeking to manage very large scale, very complex change. And, I think even the term change management is questionable, because I think, the kinds of massive complex change, when we're talking about new care models, we're talking about integrated health and care, we're thinking about people-led care. Actually talking about this using terms like change management, I think are really problematic. And, I don't think actually there's anything wrong with change programs per se. I think the problem is the way that people go about them. And too often, the leaders at the top of the system will prescribe not just the outcomes that we seek from the change, but the method of change. And what it means is that people at the front line of care, people at the point that make the magic of care happen, they will experience that change in a way that is, you have to do it, it's imposed, rather than you want to do it, which is embraced. And I think in this fast-moving era, when we see the size of our change agenda, I think we need to be moving more and more towards change platforms. And when we talk about change platforms, we actually create a platform, using Jodie's definition, a level place where everyone, including service users and citizens and families and experts from other industries, can help us tackle the most challenging issues. And actually, when we have a change platform, we value different views, different ideas. Whereas in a change program, often we'll talk about resistance to change and overcoming resistance to change. And we put horrible labels on people that are resistant, like laggards or in denial. You know, in a change platform, actually, we know we're going to get different views. We know we're going to get conflict. And what we want to do is we want to connect people with ideas and with learning. And whereas in a change program, the role of leaders is to, oversee things and make sure the change happens. Actually, in an era of change platforms, our job is to, as formal leaders, is to actually create the conditions and the circumstances where change can happen and then get out of the way. And when I look, globally at what is happening in the world of change, I see this very big shift going on from change programs to change platforms. And again, when I look across our health and care sector, what I see is just even 2 or 3 years ago, there were very, very few examples of change platforms. And now there are very, very many. And very shortly, Jodie's going to take us through some examples. And, we could have picked many, and we've just picked a few to show you. So, why? Because we need change that's effective and it's quick and broad. And we know that change comes much more naturally when we've got a platform that allows us to identify our shared interests and to brainstorm solutions. So what we need, is approaches to change, I think, more and more that are real-time, that are immediate, that are socially constructed, so people create it together. It's not, one person does it and gets a whole lot of other people to engage, but we do it together. And in this context, the leader's job isn't to design the change program, but to build the platform that allows, everybody to contribute, to initiate change, to recruit what Gary Hamill here calls Cathedrals, but, other people to take part, to suggest solutions, and to launch experiments. Because in our connected world, in our new power world, power no longer emanates from the top of the heap, but from the center of the network. And I'd say, we're living in a world of both old power and new power. And as leaders and change agents, that we need to lead with both. But, we can no longer rely just on positional power and positional levers to make change happen. So, we work with lots and lots of different kinds of change platforms. And just looking around the world, we're seeing, we're seeing lots of different sources and sorts of platforms. So we see change platforms that are about connecting people. So people that have got a common interest that want to connect with each other. We see mobilizing platforms where we've got a call to action around a particular cause, and the platform is used to mobilize people for action. We see learning platforms where people come and learn from each other. We see knowledge platforms where, I'm going to talk a little bit about knowledge platforms later on, but the idea of a knowledge platform is there's so much knowledge and information out there. How can we create a platform where people can share knowledge and understand, what might be the best thing to do? And we also see lots of crowdsourcing platforms. And a crowdsourcing platform is where actually what we want to do is we've got a really big problem or a really important change process. So actually what we do is that we use the wisdom of the crowd. We enable lots and lots of people to contribute. And the thing about these kinds of platforms is that they all overlap. And the final thing I wanted to say is, I think as many of you or a number of you have already said, in the chat box, platform principles are very long been a principle and part of change practice. And actually, I think that the change community, organizational development leaders have been using these principles for way longer than Apple or Google or Facebook came on the scene. And actually, what we're seeking to do by the use of change platforms is to build on the very fine traditions in the field of organizational development in creating communities of interest and community practice. So when we actually create network-based communities on a common interest or a common area of practice. But I think the great thing about platforms now is that the kind of technology that we have, that we didn't have even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, enables us to connect much more widely and at greater speed. So to build our community practice and build our communities of interest at a speed and scale that we've never had before. Now, I'm just going to stop there for a moment, and I'm just going to ask our chat monitor, who is Kate, to just tell us what's been happening in the chat box, and I'm going to put Janet on notice in terms of Twitter. So, first of all, can we hear from Kate? What are we seeing in the chat box, Kate?
Hi. There's so much activity in chat box, it's quite difficult actually to keep up with it. There was a lot of discussion about the old and the new for the power, and so lots of discussion about that. And we've had some really great examples that have been given to us as well. Tracy Robson talks about the maternity examples that are currently going on. And Leslie Callow says that this is about everybody having a chance to be part of the platform and having an opportunity to become equal partners, and we must remember to support through coaching. There was a great discussion going on and going into a lot of detail over the words that we should use. So it's just been an amazing discussion going on there. Helen.
Thanks very much, Kate. And we can mute you. And great. And Janet, what's been happening on Twitter?
There's been some really interesting discussion around some of the key concepts that you've been talking about, Helen, around change management, and I've got Amjad saying that it's getting too mechanical, around the idea around failure, and Kerry Pace is saying, why can't we learn from it? Some people are saying, let's tear down the walls, and there seems to be a lot of momentum around this idea around tearing down the walls. So a lot of really good suggestions about how we can move forward on this agenda, and a lot of activity here. So keep watching on this space, really.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Janet. So let's get practical now. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Jodie Brown. And Jodie is going to take us through some example platforms. And I'm just going to hand over presenter right to Jodie.
Thank you, Helen. Are you going to hand the ball over to me?
I have just handed it. I've just handed it to you.
Just arrived.
Yeah, great.
Oh, hello everybody. My name's Jodie Brown, and I'm in sunny Dorset at the moment, so I do hope that my sound is okay for you. If you start to experience any problems, please shout in the chat box and let us know. Otherwise, I will just keep talking and assuming everything is going well. So
we can hear loud and clear, Jodie.
Fantastic. That's good. That's very good for Dorset. What I want to do is give you quite a diverse array of example platforms. And the idea behind doing this isn't to terrify you all into thinking that you've now got to go away and create your own kind of high-tech platforms, as many of these are. But what I want to do is inspire you and really get you thinking about what is it about these platforms that make them so successful. And I think the interesting point to me is how is these people gone about achieving what they have done? Think about the traditional change program approach and have done what they've done, the benefit of having that platform, and how can you bring elements of these platforms into your change. So I'm new to this, so I'm just going to have to flick the slide over. So here we go. This is the first example. This is GIFGAF, and this example was given to us by Ollie Benson, one of our team members. And I just want to read you the slogan because I think this is really inspiring. They say, we're a group of people who one day put down our phones, scratched and thought, there's a better way of doing this mobile stuff. Now, that got me really excited. I mean, that's the beginnings of a social movement there, isn't it? But GIFGAF, in a nutshell, is a platform, and it's inspired by Wikipedia and Facebook, and it's based on this concept of mutuality, on this concept of you give something and you get something back. And it's all about members creating mobile phone services that they want. And it rewards its network of customers for doing much of the work that's actually done by employees. So the customers themselves are taking the role of the employee and creating value for themselves and for other people. It's very much a non-institutional way of getting things done, a real people-led network. And if you think back what Helen said about Gen G and global and generous, and you know how we need to have that emotional connection, you know, the Good Samaritan kind of figure in us. This is for something for people who like to get involved and who get excited about doing things differently. So just on to another slide about gifts. I just wanted to talk a little bit about NPS, Net Promoter Scores. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, and I'm not going to get too technical, but because of this community that's formed, there's this really fiercely loyal community of customers around this platform now. And they've got a Net Promoter Score, which is basically the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, is based on one very simple, and I think you'll find quite familiar question. How likely is it that you would recommend your company, so GIFGAF, to a friend or colleague? So I'm sure many of you are thinking, that's just a bit like the friends and family test. But the interesting thing here is probably most of you haven't heard of this company before, but they've got a Net Promoter Score of 74, which is on a par with Apple and Amazon. So you can see there the power of the platform brings about that community cohesion and this energy to mobilize themselves in defense of their own brand. I'm now going to move on to another example. So we're moving away from the technical side here, perhaps to something a little bit more fun and something that's very much up my street. I'm a big fan of Lego. You might not have heard of it before. Kazoo is a platform for people who are passionate about making their own creations and sets of Lego. Now, these people have come up with ideas of things that could be created as Lego sets. So I've given you a couple of examples there, the Lego Rubik's Cube, and my particular favourite, the Lego Beetles. And these are called MOCs, or My Own Creations. And as a creative individual, you can commercialise your own creation on this platform, but you need the support of the people out there. You need someone to find your idea and put it up there, and then you need people to vote on it and they really like what you're doing. And through the power of the crowd, you're given the chance to get your creation through to production. So again, this is a platform, this is an open innovation platform, which gives people who might not otherwise have that chance to get their ideas and their creativity seen and realised. So I'm now going to move on to something that might be a little bit more familiar with you. This is a platform. If you haven't been to look at it, please do. It's Break Dengue. And some of you might recognise our good friend Celine Schillinger in the picture. Celine is a fellow health and care radical graduate and a big supporter of The Edge and all that we do in the Horizons team. So dengue, as most of you know, it's a disease against, at the moment, which there's no prevention or cure that currently exists. And this platform is all about mobilisation. Break Dengue is a non-profit open platform that engages and educates people around dengue fighting initiatives from all over the world in one centralised hub. And this is the first of its kind. Nobody has ever brought people together in this way around a single disease or condition. And in its first week alone, this platform had over 10,000 Facebook followers, 100,000 after 3 months. And after a year, it had 250,000 followers. I think this just goes to show that this is probably one of those conditions that probably wouldn't have been so well supported or known about, but through its community, it's really And like I say, if you haven't done so, have a click on the slide set when it comes out, or I'll share the link after I finish talking, of Celine talking about it, a real passionate talk about the rationale behind this platform. So far we've looked at platforms that are pretty much based on technology, on online resources. Now, New Health and Care Voices, another great friend of us here on the Edge and at the school. Now, this is a platform which isn't actually purely based on technology. This is about people. This is about people wanting to make a difference. And the idea of New Health and Care Voices was born at the NHS Expo by our friends Kirsty Stott, who's a nurse and graduate management alumni, and Vanessa Garrity, a registered mental health nurse. And they wanted to create a space, you know, we could otherwise call it a platform, but for values-based conversations about healthcare. And they wanted to develop this network throughout England. So they had to start small and then let that network grow on its own. And I'm sure many of you who are in the UK will have now been to Health and Care Voices events. So we're not just saying platforms are online and digital. This is also about people getting together. But through the creation of those facilitated networks, these amazing things happen.
Jodie, it's Helen. Jodie,
hi, Helen.
Hi. Some people are struggling with hearing you with the audio connection. Can I just check? Have you switched off VPN? Have you got VPN?
Let me.
Because I think you might. Okay.
Okay.
Tell you what, I'll do the next one for you. I'll present the next slide while you check if you've got and just check if you've got VPN off. Okay.
I switched VPN off now. Yep. Okay.
Okay. Great. Right. You should be fine now. Go for it.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. So moving on to another example now, and I think this is a really exciting, fun platform. This was created by Roy Lilly, and this is the Academy of Fabulous NHS Fabulous Stuff. And it's a platform for sharing all those things that are so fabulous about the NHS. And it's a collaboration that ensures that best practice examples, great ideas, and service solutions are available to all. And what's so wonderful about it is it's completely powered by you, by the community. So you can nominate initiatives, services, ideas, innovations, and then the crowd will vote for them to say which ones they think are the best. And on a regular basis, awards are given, not at big ceremonies, but through recognition on the platform. And this is a really great way of sharing and scaling innovation and best practice. And what happens is when you submit an idea, it gets tagged. So you can go on then, and if you're doing a project or a change initiative around, I don't know, let's say dementia, you can click on the dementia cloud and you can have a look at all the ideas that have been submitted, stuff that you just wouldn't know about had you, you know, been sitting in your office in an unconnected way. So just a really fantastic example of all that's great in the NHS. So we've got another example now, when I can get the page to turn. Here we go. So Flip the Clinic. This is something that Helen's told me about, and I've done a bit of reading about it this morning. Fantastic example by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Programme. And Flip the Clinic, it's an open experiment to transform the healthcare experience. And it's a community of people on this platform that share and encourage ideas to reimagine the medical encounter between patients and care providers. The flips are actionable ideas for change. And I had a look at the website this morning just to get a feel for it. And I really liked flip number 35. The idea that's been put forward is model your clinic like the Apple Store. I think a lot of us would probably agree with that. And I want to have a bit more of a read about that and see what that's all about. But the really important thing about this one is across the middle, build the future of clinical care. Join the Flip the Clinic Lab in Philadelphia. So what we're seeing here, very similar to Healthcare Voices, is we've got an online community, but you can flip it out into a physical community of people that actually make things happen in this kind of lab environment. So again, you know, let's not get hung up on it purely being about technology. This is more so about the people. Another fantastic example, and again, another very good friend of ours, Matex and Flo and Jill and all the other wonderful people who are behind this initiative. Matex was really born out of Change Day, and it's an initiative, it's a mobilisation to identify and share best practice across our maternity services in the country. And it's a really powerful grassroots campaign using Jill Phillips, her Whose Shoes approach, to finding out what is best practice in maternity services. And I don't know if you see this on Twitter, do have a look for this hashtag Matex. The conversations that go on and the snowball effect of what's happening because of this movement is just phenomenal. It's something that we wouldn't have seen. And going back to my original point, how could this have happened had we sat down with a PMO, perhaps from a national office in the NHS, and said, how can we make maternity experience everybody's business? Because it is. Moving on to another platform now. This is an example of a platform that Leeds teaching hospitals are using with a group called Clever Together. Now, we've done some work with Clever Together in the Horizons group as well. And it's based on the principles of crowdsourcing. I don't know if you remember the slide that Helen talked about earlier about Joy's Law, that wherever you are, usually the person that knows the most is in another organisation or somewhere else. Crowdsourcing builds on that philosophy that within the staff group of a trust, so in this case 4,500 staff and stakeholders, contributed to co-create what they call the Leeds Way, a redefinition of their vision and values. And I mean, the facts and the information on this slide speak for itself. It's essentially the platform that's been created is an online workshop. Now imagine if you needed to go out and find that information, but to do it face to face, it would be a very slow, tedious and possibly quite a forced approach to doing it. But this is just a fantastic way where you, again, you know, to use the phrase that you all like so much, we're breaking down walls. We're letting in people to these platforms that traditionally wouldn't have had a chance to have their say. So I'm going to move on to something now which is really familiar to me and very much close to my heart. And this is an initiative that I started with one of my colleagues, Crystal, down in Dorset Healthcare several years ago. And we started out with a guerrilla marketing campaign. We wanted to make sure that innovation and great ideas were everybody's business in our trust. We had a trust of 5,000 people set across 13 different community hospitals, working in the community, working out of the county. How could you connect all those people to harness the power of their passion, their insight, their experience? So we came up with this idea of I Matter, ideas into action. And we had this guerrilla marketing campaign where all these posters appeared one morning in everybody's offices, on everybody's computers. And we used a platform called Crowdicity. Now, there's lots of platforms out there, but we really liked the Crowdicity platform because of the way it felt so social, it felt so relational. And you can see a screenshot of it here. Now, this is a few years old because I'm no longer in Dorset. But what you can see is something that looks very similar to a kind of a Twitter or Facebook type environment. And you can see in the middle where the little speech bubbles are, it says challenges. And what we would do on a monthly basis is set challenges to the trust. Things that needed solving, so perhaps some of those wicked problems, or things that needed really good engagement. And there'd be different kinds of challenges that would be suitable for different groups. And then they would be shown on this carousel, which would keep moving. So when anybody went onto the website, something would catch their eye. And in the true sense of social media, there would be an activity feed. So down in the left-hand corner, you could see who just said what about what idea. And we also used the kind of gamification idea that to contribute, you got points. To vote, you got points. To submit ideas, you got points. And that could move you up the leaderboard to show that you were making this contribution. Now, iMatter, I think we were quite early in what we were doing. It was quite groundbreaking, and You know, as you can imagine, we encountered various technical difficulties, various cultural difficulties. But the important thing was we were trying something different, and it was a platform. It was an open innovation platform. I don't know how well you can see this, but just to give you an example of how important it is that platforms aren't just about stagnant ideas. The worst thing that can happen on a platform is people submit their ideas and then nothing happens. So this just shows you a very quick example of how we had an idea into implementation in 22 hours. So we had a member of staff went to a Digital by Default conference, and we'd already been talking in the trust about how we were overburdened with emails, something I guess you're all familiar with. It was a very email-heavy culture in which we were working. And this person, infused by her new learning from the Digital by Default conference, shared an idea that she had learnt about at the conference on that day. I think, in fact, she shared it on the train on the way home on this platform, on iMatter platform. From another site in the trust, a member of staff then read that idea and thought, this is a really great idea. I've never heard of this before. She then forwarded the idea to one of her colleagues, and our colleague liked it as well and put it straight into action. And then within the case of an hour or two, everybody within that hospital site knew about the idea. Now, the idea was something to do with, I think, have you heard of self-detonating emails, where after a certain amount of time, it would be deleted from the inbox. So we weren't sending around emails that were time sensitive, and then they were just sitting in people's boxes waiting to be read. If they were no longer relevant, they disappeared. So that was the idea. But in 22 hours, this idea spread across the whole trust site. And I just think that goes to show the power of the platform and the power of the people who make things happen. So just the final thing from me, I just need to flick onto the last slide. I just want to share with you a little bit of learning as to what makes a social innovation platform successful. I think you can extrapolate this to any platform, but I'm just drawing on my experience from iMatter. So first of all, this might surprise you or might not, but board sponsorship and buy-in. Now, yes, we're rebels and we're radicals, and we don't always wait for permission. And actually, in this case, we did have some permission and we did have some support, but not trust-wide support. So it really helps if you can use your influencing skills and get somebody in a senior position who's going to back you up and support you. It can be done without that, of course it can, and you know that's very much what we say in the school, but it does help your case if you've got somebody on your side. It also helps if what you're doing is really linked to the vision, values and strategy that's going on in the trust at the time, because it's going to solve a problem. It's going to scratch somebody's itch, and that is therefore going to be successful. You need a culture that promotes engagement and values staff. Now, this is a hard one. You don't just switch this culture on and off. But by creating these kind of platforms, you really give people that feeling that things are changing, that they do have a voice. And again, in Dorset, people were so surprised when they were allowed to have these direct conversations with the chief exec over the platform. It was opening up a new line of conversation. I'll skip the meaningful innovation strategy because that was specifically to do with what we were trying to do. But this is such an important point. No idea is bad. No idea is stupid. We want everybody's ideas, and we want people to really think outside the box and come up with the wackiest of ideas, because the principles of crowdsourcing is someone out there will come in and make sense of what you've said and make it tangible. So never rule anything out because it seems too off the wall. Very important point, like I said before, quick, measurable wins. People need to see that things are happening as a result. And it doesn't have to be return on investment in its purest sense. Think of social return on investment. Think of engagement. Think of how people are feeling about being at work. You can measure these things in so many different ways. Take the good with the bad. Don't succumb to risk aversion. Platforms can be scary places for people who like to control things. Do let people have their say and trust people, and also trust there's procedures in place that you can use if things do go too far. But in the whole time I was running iMatter, we never had anybody that broke any of the policies or the user guidelines. Keep it live and fresh, keep it happening, and you're important in that role. You've got to keep it active. You are a role model on that platform. Make sure there's rewards. What's in it for people? Why should they contribute? Why should they take part? Do you know what? Sometimes just a simple thank you is all that's needed, a recognition. Look at the gamification idea I talked about. People love earning points. People love collecting. What can you do to make it really, you know, a real incentive to them? And then think about how you can mobilize organizational radicals, people that really, you will have your early adopters to the platform. What about those people? How can you bring them together and then use them as a force for good and set them loose to spread the word across the organization? This is the kind of networking effect, the trickle-down effect. How can you harness that? So one very last thing for me, and then I'm going to hand back to Helen. I found this resource, I think it was our friend Adi Gaskell, had a tweet about it, and I'm just showing it to you as a tool for anybody that might be interested in open innovation and using platforms for open innovation. It's a click and read resource, and it's just got the most wonderful resources in there and examples of how you can go about bringing about an open innovation culture using crowdsourcing. So I'm assuming you could all hear me because I haven't heard anybody else putting up their hands, and I haven't been paying attention to the chat box. But if anybody wants to talk to me about any of the examples offline or on Twitter, please do shout. I'm very happy to share. So what I'm going to do now is hand the ball back to Helen.
Great, thank you.
There we go.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jodie. And I think, thank you for some really fantastic examples of platforms. And I think, there's people that might be upset because they've got a really great platform and it wasn't in our presentation. But, there were so many to choose from, and we tried to pick a variety that demonstrated, different aspects. But, if you've got an effective change platform and you'd like us to be highlighting it, can you write in the chat box or tweet it so that we can understand what you're doing? So I'm just going to stop for a minute now around, just having heard what Jodie was saying and from your own experiences, what are some of the characteristics of effective change platforms? And so Jodie, I might even actually get you to say this first. So
yeah,
just in terms of your research and getting ready for this, what do you think are some of the characteristics of effective change platforms?
Characteristics. So it's got to be engaging. It's got to look exciting. I've seen so many platforms that look really dry and boring and clinical and very kind of industrial. Make it exciting and make it appealing to people. I think as well, it's just about getting that buzz going, isn't it? And it's finding the right people early on who are going to create a buzz. Because we've all been to forums before where, we want to join in conversations and there's nothing really happening. And I think it's so important to get something happening before you start shouting about your platform. I think the only other thing I would say is don't be afraid to try new things. Just because there's things out there that are marketing themselves as platforms doesn't mean they're the right solution. There's so much free stuff out there that you can play around with and test out, and perhaps be a pioneer as the first person to use that as a platform. So, really think creatively about what that platform would look like.
Yeah, so that's great advice. And again, I think that's really reiterated with what some people are putting in the chat box, with regard to that. Passion, a sense of togetherness, responsiveness, finding the right people. So we need a few figures, a sense of belonging, creating a sense of community, and a sense that everybody will be listened to and have a voice. Bringing people together around shared values. Amanda talks about follow-up. I'm going to talk about that later on because I agree with Amanda. That's absolutely critical. Having new content. Ease of access. I think the things that colleagues are saying here are great. And Jodie's put her email address on the chat, so if anybody wants to follow up, that's great. And Anne has given us the example of the Greater Manchester Chaplaincy Collaborative. And again, we'd be really keen to follow up. And what we'll do is we'll take, if you can keep putting things in the chat box, we actually, we will take these and build these into to what we're doing. But again, just the very fact, I think, of working with platforms and understanding that people are engaging because they want to, not because they have to, it just makes us start our change in a different way. So I want to go on now, and I want to talk about a little bit about knowledge platforms. I want to give notice to Kate and Janet that what we'll do is we'll take Twitter and chat comments right at the end. So if you get geared up for that, if that's okay. So we talked about knowledge platforms being one of the key platforms that we create around change, and I think in this social era of digital connectivity, the need for knowledge platforms becomes greater and greater. And I think some of you will have seen this slide before, but we have so much access to so much information. And as it says here, getting information off the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. There's so much of it. Where do we start? And there's even, as a result of this, there's a new disease that's been identified, and it's called cyberchondria. And it's the unfounded anxiety concerning the state of one's health brought on by visiting health and medical websites. And there's people I know on this WebEx now saying, oh, I've got that. But again, it's the same issue. If you look up fractured neck of femur, there's several million links. How do we know, what are the right links? How do we discern things? So actually having platforms where people can connect and can share knowledge is really important. But there's another aspect to that I think matters when it comes to platforms, which is around if we want to spread new knowledge, and in our current NHS and health and social care setup, it's critical, to get that new knowledge out very, very, very widely. Okay, the best way to spread new knowledge is through social connection. Getting people having discussions, building relationships, and actually having spreading knowledge by these kind of connections is 14 times more effective than the way that we traditionally do things like written words, best practice databases, toolkits, etc. And I speak as somebody who's worked as a leader of national improvement bodies in the NHS in England for 18 years. And when we look back at the history of national improvement organisations in the NHS, what do we spend our time doing, or a lot of our time doing, is creating toolkits. And actually, what the evidence tells us is that toolkits are often like the least effective mechanism for spreading knowledge. So, I think we've got to create platforms in a social age that enable people to connect, to learn and discuss in very different ways. And in fact, one of the big themes or trends that is happening is around, when you think about documentation that we need, whether it's best practice guidance or it's manuals on how to utilize machinery or software, what's happening is that a lot of the documentation is being done away with, and instead people are creating platforms. So this is another example of a platform, and this comes from our colleague Oliver Benson. And this is a platform called Stack Overflow. And basically it's used by computer programmers. And the kind of idea of it is that if you're a computer programmer, whether a professional one or somebody that does it for joy, now don't even bother reading the programming manual, okay? Because what we do is that we use this platform called Stack Overflow, and it answers all your questions. So, you ask the community, and the community give you advice based on the reality rather than something that's written in a book. And just think, in terms of where we are as a health and care community, how we might use that approach. So instead of having best practice toolkits or guidance manuals. You know, how can we set up really fast-moving, credible, virtual communities, platforms that we can actually help each other. So the final thing I wanted to talk about today was about our team. So Jodie and I, also Kate and Janet, who are with us today, we work as part of a team within NHS Improving Quality called the Horizons team. And basically, we don't engage at all in change programs anymore. All our work is done via change platforms. And a number of you know our platforms, but I just wanted to give you some examples. So the first is the School for Health and Care Radicals, and I know that many of you on the taking part in the session today are graduates of the School for Health and Care Radicals. But you know, we set it up, the school, very purposefully to be a learning platform and not a learning program. And also, we based the school on a learning theory that's called connectivism. And it's interesting, again, connectivism has only really grown as a learning approach in the last 10 years. And what that means is actually the theory of it is that if you can actually create a platform where people can come together and learn from each other, then that's far more effective than actually having formal lectures with people. And it's great this morning, like when we look at the chat, we look at the Twitter that's coming out of this lecture already, we can see a lot of connectivism going on and people learning as much or more from the conversations and the sharing on the chat as they are with the lectures. And that's how we want it to be. So the idea for the School for Health and Care Radicals was, to create this virtual learning platform. And at the core of it is a set of, specific modules to help people to be effective boat rockers, to be the kind of change agents that can rock the boat and stay in it. But it's an open platform, so anybody can take part. And whilst 73% of the people that enrolled were from the NHS in England, we actually have had 6,500 people enroll from more than 40 countries. And, we're a very, very small team. And yet, if you look at the kind of impact and reach of it, it's been, really amazing. So during our term time, there was 65 million, there was a 65 million reach through Twitter. The slide shares for the School for Health and Care Radicals have been downloaded over 100,000 times. Okay? We've had 25,000 tweets. Very big numbers of people have become certificated change agents, and a number of you who are on this WebEx today had your virtual graduation ceremony yesterday. So congrats on that. But it's like what it enables you to do. Working, if we'd have done a traditional change program, it would have taken us years to get the kind of reach and connection and impact that we got. But because we created an open learning platform, the contribution was absolutely massive. And what's happening at the moment is that the school is being formally evaluated by the team at the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, who are the kind of experts in learning program evaluation. And the evaluation process is still going on, but they've been absolutely blown away by working through a learning platform as a contribution to learning and a new way of learning. So we all know about the Edge, which is our knowledge platform. So the Edge is a knowledge platform where we look around the world and we find the most interesting and useful knowledge around being a change activist, around transformational leadership, around the spread of change, and we make that available. And we've got 21,000 active users from 120 countries. And if you haven't seen the current edition of the Edge, actually it's a takeover by New Zealand, by colleagues from Cathedrals. And it's a really phenomenal edition. So if you haven't done so already, go on to the website and sign up and read what our colleagues are saying. Jodie mentioned earlier that we had a change platform as a collaboration between our team and the Health Service Journal and the Nursing Times. And basically it was called Challenge Top-Down Change. And it was asking our whole community, you know, what do we need to do change in better ways to get better results? And there were 14,000 contributions to this, and like some amazing stuff. And again, you know, I think very much with what people have been saying on the chat, and also, you know, Joda's advice, if you make it attractive and you pull people towards it, people want to take part. And as a result of that, we created, you know, collectively, the 14,000 contributions collected the first ever crowdsourced theory or approach to change in the NHS. And again, if you have time to go and look at this, it's phenomenal stuff. And really, this is only a start, because we're going to follow this up and work on it more. But those contributors identified 10 barriers to change, and they didn't just identify the barriers. You know, people took part in a process to identify which ones were the most important and why, and how this should be framed. And none of us on this call will be at all surprised at the things that were said. You know, what are the biggest barriers to change? Really confusing strategies so that we don't know what the priorities are. You know, over controlling leadership, poor project management, and being over project managed as well as under project managed. You know, inhibiting environments, perverting incentives. And what our 14,000 contributors also did was identify really positively, you know, what are the building blocks for change around leadership that's inspiring and supportive, you know, being flexible and adapted, having autonomy and trust, thought diversity, and so on. What's interesting, if you look at those 11 building blocks, you know, most of our change thinking at the moment and our change practice is often, you know, about the levers and drivers for change and incentives. And yet, actually, what our 14,000 contributors said to us is actually focusing on shared purpose and building an environment for change, and being valued actually is the most important thing. And I just think, oh my goodness, if our leadership community really took the lessons of this and built on what was being said, how much faster forward we could go. And, you know, we're very proud to have supported NHS Change Day for the last 3 years. And NHS Change Day, I think, is a really great example of a mobilising platform. So one day a year when we encourage people to take a specific action that will make a difference. And in 2014, we had 800,000 pledges were made to make a difference on Change Day. We're still evaluating 2015, but what our evaluators have told us is there's 4 times the local activity and connectivity in 2015 compared to 2014, and that 2/3 of all the acute trusts in the country had Change Day activity going on. And, you know, we weren't aware of that because we just look at who puts what on our website. But when you start to use different techniques that are evaluation techniques for social platforms, you know, all sorts of other ideas come through. So, you know, let's just think about this. So, you know, going back to cathedrals and bazaars, you know, we're often, you know, we're very good and we've got a long tradition around, you know, building cathedrals and structures. But, you know, how do we create a bazaar? You know, what do we need to be doing to be building change platforms? So I just wanted to give you a little bit of advice. So the first thing is that we have to be very clear about our intention or goal. So why do we want this change platform? Because as I think we've been able to demonstrate this morning, there's lots of different platforms for different things. So, you know, is it about problem solving? Is it about creating learning? Is it about mobilising for change? Is it, like Jodie's own example, around identifying and spreading innovation? The second thing we have to do is that we have to articulate our mission. And again, I think many of you have said this morning, you know, it's got to be inspiring. It's got to be a mission that lots of people want to contribute to as a shared purpose. Then the next thing is to set out what your objectives are and the stages in your process. Because some platforms are like a one-stage process where, you know, we create a platform for a particular you know, issue, and we get people engaged in that. Other platforms are multi-stage. So if you look, for instance, at the Challenge Top-Down Change platform that we created with HSJ and the Nursing Times, there were multiple stages to that process. So first of all, we had a stage where we asked people to contribute around what are the barriers and enablers of change. And then we asked people to rank them. And then we asked people to put across what their ideas were around practical ways of enabling change and overcoming the barriers. And then we went through a stage of ranking those again and coming up with 17 that we published in our guidance. So, understand whether it's a one-stage or a multi-stage process. Then the next thing is about identify the people that you want to be in your community and who your change platform's aimed at. So if you look, for example, at the St James's, at the Leeds Teaching Hospital example that Jodie told us about, that was a platform for a closed community, okay, for 4,500 people who work at Leeds Teaching Hospitals. And other platforms like the School for Health and Care Radicals as a learning platform was an open platform, anybody could contribute. And what you need to do is people will only contribute to your platform if you can reach them. So, we really need to think about how are we going to connect with these people and engage them. Then you need to actually find a platform. And again, as Jodie said, often it might not have to be a technical platform, but if you do want a technical platform, think about actually what exists currently in your organisation, because there may be some already. And then the other thing is that sometimes we pay for platforms, but actually there's lots and lots of platforms that are out there that are free that we can just take. It's really important that we're measuring, and we're not just measuring at the end, but we're measuring all the way through. So how many people are contributing? What impact is it having? We need to massively engage our community and really get people on board and contributing, and we need to set their expectations. So we need to make it very clear, if you contribute to this, what will happen, because what we've got to do is there needs to kind of be a contract on this, because if we want people to give their time and effort and energy and wisdom freely, they need to get something back. So we need to be very clear in the sense what the give and the get is. And we have to work really hard at keeping the connections going and flowing. It's interesting, the other day, I was talking to a very senior person in the NHS, and they said, well, I haven't seen any of those crowdsourcing platforms that work very well. And, every time I see it, they're not very good. They don't get many people. And the reason that happens isn't because it's a bad platform. It's because the people that are leading the work haven't massively engaged in keeping the connections going. So if people contribute, we need to be responding, we need to be thanking, we need to be building on, because people will only contribute, like I said, if there's a gain from doing it, something to get out of it, and we've got to just keep managing that very purposefully. Also, people put forward lots of ideas, but the ideas have got to result in action, because we're not doing platforms because we like doing platforms. We're doing platforms because we want to change the world and we want to make things better for our patients and citizens. So, I think we've got to very openly and transparently show how we're converting ideas into action. And I think too many platforms, end up in a situation whereby when the platform's happening, it's very active and engaged. And then we get to the end of it and we breathe a sigh of relief that we've done it, but then the follow-up doesn't happen. And if we want people to keep doing this, we must always, always, always follow up. You see, once you start down this path, you have to do the follow-up and you have to continue. Because as many of you have said in the chat box, platforms are about people engaging because they want to. They're about relationships. They're about goodwill. They're about the spirit of the volunteer. And people won't keep doing this if it feels like, well, you keep extracting my ideas and nothing happens. And I think this quote from Miller for Merchant is beautiful, If people give to a cause, which is what we're asking them to do, they expect a relationship, which is ongoing, not a transaction. And again, going back to old power, new power at the beginning, new power is about relationships, okay, and connections, and the power of connections. Platforms are about new power and relationships. And we can't dip our toe into platforms and new power, and then because it's kind of scary or something happens, revert back to our old power ways. So just a final couple of things, and then I'm going to ask Jodie to say something, and we'll hear from Kate and from Janet about the Twitter chat and the WebEx chat. So one thing that we know about platforms is that they're only as good as the people leading them. Okay, it's like any approach to change. We're going to get platforms that are phenomenally successful and platforms that are less successful. And I'd say, as a change agent, I think it's really important that we learn these skills and we know how to manage them, and we maybe partner up with other people that are doing platforms, because this is so a way of the future. So I'm just going to stop there. And Kate, do you want to give us a quick update on what we're seeing on the WebEx chat?
Yes, hi Helen. So there was initially a lot of concerns about, people raised the concerns about NHS firewalls and how difficult and how we can actually get a platform that connects with that. And, that is something that I think most of us do sympathise with. There was also about that the culture is one of the most important things that we need to build on, and that's where platforms can help to support this. Lots of discussion about gamification, and love the idea of that, and then going on to Candy Crush and how that can that has great gamification with it, and could we build things like that within it. Kerry wrote something lovely on the chat room, and it was about that she was a passionate person, and this has really made her feel that change is possible, and she's feeling re-energized and full of energy again, because sometimes you can feel separate, and it's difficult to get that energy again. So it was great input, and thanks for your input there, Kerry, throughout the session. We had lots of discussions about boats and about whether we were fast boats or tugs, which is quite interesting. And the virtual hospital, lots of people wanted to build the virtual hospital, and maybe it's called Think Twitter, which was great. So
yeah, thanks, Kate, and thanks everybody for contributing to a brilliant chat. And Janet, what's been happening in the Twitter sphere?
Hi Helen, and hi everyone. Yeah, a lot of activity in the Twitter area here. A lot of people tweeting out a lot of the slides and really saying that they're learning a lot from this whole experience today. So a lot of the slides are being tweeted out to wider communities as a result. But there's one or two really interesting conversations. One from Kerry Pace, who says it's about change and confidence to do things with originality, ignoring the naysayers and sneak around barriers. I thought that was quite interesting. And another one from Fiona Gibson saying, learning how to weave our networks like spiders weaving a web. I really enjoyed that one. So lots of really good suggestions about how to do change and really responding positively to the talk today. Great.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Kate. And I know, just responding to Kate's point about the technology, it's coming. Wi-Fi everywhere, free Wi-Fi for staff and patients. It's coming. So we should assume a future where that's going to happen. And even if you work in a place now where it's a real barrier, it's changing and it's coming. And we should assume that. And if it gets in the way of things that you want to do, go and talk. Go and talk to somebody. So one of my colleagues was recently in the hospital, and it was a hospital that offered free Wi-Fi to patients. And when she actually was in the hospital on the medical admissions unit, the Wi-Fi wasn't working very well. So I phoned up the chief nurse, and he went and got a router put in the area. And I think sometimes we just don't ask, and I think we should. So I've got one more thing to say, but I'm going to get Jodie first of all to just do a couple of concluding remarks, Jodie.
Okay, thanks, Helen. I'm just really excited to see all the energy that's going on in the Twitter and chat forums around the practicalities of platforms. And I think my concluding remark is, let's not leave this here. If we've got all these people out there who are so passionate about making this a reality, you know, we need a platform of our own to carry on this conversation. I think we need to get more examples. I would love to hear of all the examples out there of change platforms. And I think together we could come up with some really, really great practical tips and advice for people who want to go and take this further. So don't feel down in the dumps if you're not a techie kind of person. This is about the technology per se. This is about you and your passion. And, you know, let's all join forces and keep this going, keep this conversation going.
Yeah, fantastic. And we can keep it going next Wednesday. I hope that many of you will be able to come on to the tweet chat that we're having between 4 and 5 next Wednesday. And no, just I started with Galadriel, and so I'm going to end with Galadriel. And she says, you know, even the smallest creature can change the world, and you know, every one of us can change the world. You know, in a new power era, you know, working through change platforms, we can connect with others, and we can change the world. And just finally, here's some ways to connect. So follow us on Twitter, and it's great that lots of people are adding their Twitter addresses to the chat. Yeah, subscribe to The Edge, because everything we do appears in there. Get materials for the School for Health and Cathedrals, because all those materials are still available, and you can just download them, you can have the lot. And then finally, there'll be an Edge talk like this every month, and we'll be advertising those very, very shortly. And the final thing to say is we've got lots of references. So when you get the slides, what we'll do is we'll put them onto SlideShare, and we will tweet those out. You can just download all the references that we've talked about today. So thank you for joining us. It's 11 o'clock, and we've been at this intensively for an hour and a half. It doesn't feel like it. And you know, thank you everybody for your interaction and your contribution. And yeah, let's change the world. Have a lovely weekend. Bye then.